Hello again. Hello, we're back. I hope everybody had a great lunch. And now we are all part of a webcast. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. My name is Willa Black. I'm a director of the Canadian Club of Toronto and your host for today. Viewers, thank you for joining us. Our club is known for its ability to provide a forum for business, political, and cultural leaders to share their ideas and to challenge our thinking. Through our programs and activities, we offer access to dynamic public figures from here at home and from around the world. This afternoon's panelists are a wonderful example of that, I think. And before I formally introduce them, let me tell you about a few of our upcoming events. Tomorrow, so you can all come back tomorrow, Wednesday, April 19th, the Honorable Ahmed Hussein, Federal Minister of Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship, will speak at our podium. The following week, Wednesday, April 26th, we'll feature a healthcare innovation panel. It'll discuss how research, science, and technology are shaping our healthcare experience. To order your tickets or to learn more about the club, please visit our website at canadianclub.org. You can also join the conversation via Twitter and Instagram by following us at, and now this is important, because if you don't get it right and you just do @Canadian Club, you'll have a whole bunch of sort of whiskey drinkers wondering why the heck they're getting tweets about social innovation. So the one you'll want is @CDNCLUBTO, or by using that hashtag. So, and then I'll start tweeting as soon as I sit down. And I want to express special thanks to today's event sponsor, Cisco, represented here by Rebecca Singh-Beal. Thank you for your generous support. Let me clap for that. It's important to have sponsors. And I want to also acknowledge the youth and young leaders who are with us today from Ryerson University's Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship Program. Welcome and thank you for joining us. Yes, yes. And now our panel. While the field of social innovation is still relatively young, no one doubts its role in driving positive change in every aspect of society. Social innovation by its nature embraces creativity and collaboration. And with that come new approaches and new models for innovation, rethinking finance, the social enterprise, and technology to drive real transformative change. So then how can philanthropy and corporate citizenship contribute to social innovation? How can all the players in the social innovation arena come together for measurable social good? Let's find out from some of our country's pioneers in this field. We're lucky to have with us today Geoff Cape. You can tell which one he is. CEO, Evergreen. Geoff is the founder and CEO of Evergreen, a nationally recognized leader on urban sustainability. Geoff is on the board of the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. He is a fellow with the Rockefeller Foundation, and he was recently awarded Canadian Social Entrepreneur of the Year by the Schwab Foundation. I did not know that, Geoff. I did not get the email, but congratulations. That's wonderful. Valerie Chort, Vice President, Corporate Citizenship, Executive Director, RBC Foundation. Valerie is responsible for RBC's Global Corporate Citizenship Strategy. She joined RBC 2 years ago after more than 14 years with Deloitte, where she was a partner with Enterprise Risk Services. Valerie was also the America's leader of the sustainability and climate change practice. Some of you will have seen RBC's wonderful and exciting announcement of Future Launch on March 28th. This is RBC's largest ever commitment to help young Canadians prepare for the future of work, and I hope we'll hear a little bit more about that from you today, Valerie. Narinder, Dhami, Managing Director, LEAP, the Centre for Social Impact. LEAP is Canada's leading venture philanthropy firm. Narinder is the founding executive director of Rise Asset Development, which provides entrepreneurial options to those with a history of mental health and addiction challenges. A lecturer at the University of Toronto, she co-created the first course in microfinance and impact investing. She also worked with Ryerson to launch the Professional Master's Diploma in Social Finance. It's a very distinguished career. And our panel today is moderated by the indomitable, formidable Allyson Hewitt, J.W. McConnell Family Foundation Senior Fellow, Social Innovation at Mars. Allyson is like the godmother of social innovation in Canada. Really. As a leader in the social innovation programs at Mars, she's literally helped hundreds of social ventures to become economically sustainable and to increase their social impact. A sought-after public speaker, we're so lucky to have her here today. She's had significant impact on public policy. She's also the social entrepreneur in residence in the Masters in Business, Entrepreneurship, and Technology program at the University of Waterloo. So as I mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or comments for our panelists, please fill out one of the Q&A cards on your tables, and one of our staff will collect them. I know we're going to hear a lot of wonderful stuff today in the panel, and we want to really hear from the audience. It'll make it so much more dynamic. So panelists, Allyson, welcome. The Canadian Club of Toronto's podium is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Willow. Much appreciated. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out today to have a really interesting discussion with some wonderful leaders in this space. So here's the deal. The issues we face, from climate change to homelessness, are really too big for any one organization, or I would suggest even one sector, to tackle on their own. We need new ways of doing good better. Partnering for impact is the only way forward. And guess what? It's also a good thing for business alongside a good thing for community. We're talking win-win strategies, not win-lose strategies. HBR, so I like to quote like HBR instead of me, like, but you know, HBR says things like, in tomorrow's interdependent world, highly collaborative systems will outperform organizations characterized by that adversarial win-loss approach. We need social innovations to help us rethink not only what we do, but how we do it. With the help of the J.W. McConnell Family Foundation, I'm currently helping build an ecosystem that involves pro bono, skills-based volunteers matched with social purpose organizations. We talk a lot about cross-sectoral collaboration. This is one way groups can actually come together to collectively grow their innovation capacity and their innovation muscle. So what we're going to do today is hear from 3 stellar examples of social innovation in our country, one that is disrupting business for better. So I'm going to start off with each of them just quickly telling us a little bit about who they are, what they want to highlight about their initiatives that they're currently working on, and why it's a social innovation. Okay? So we're going to start. Narinder, why don't you kick us off?
Great. So I lead the Center for Social Impact, so we're known as LEAP in the PICO Center. Essentially, our model is about scaling what works in Canada. So I would say many of you in this room knew David Pico or worked with David Pico. So if you think about kind of his impact and his journey of both being a corporate strategist and civic entrepreneur and the change he was able to effect in Toronto, think about the center as systematizing what he was able to do organically. So we were founded and incubated by the Boston Consulting Group with founding partners Ernst & Young, McCarthy Tetro, and the Offered Group. We have 2 new partners, Helen Knowlton Strategies and Perennial. And essentially, we bring together the private sector to invest in the nonprofit sector in solutions that work and help provide them with access to the institutional support they need to scale. So our model has 3 pillars. So the first is partnering with all-star nonprofits. So those social entrepreneurs, and there's a few in the room, I see some of our portfolio charities in the room today, who are driving to create social change, who have a model that's differentiated, that has quantifiable impact, which is sometimes tough to do and to find, but these social entrepreneurs that won't rest until their intervention is in the water stream. We team that with the best in the private sector. So BCG, Ernst & Young, McCarthy Tetro, Offered, Helen Knowlton, and Perennial. And again, teaming that with forward-thinking donors. So both high net worth individuals who take a more strategic approach to philanthropy and want to see their dollars create impact, and corporations that want to do more than just writing a check. So together, kind of those three pieces allow us to ensure that the best nonprofits across Canada can access the most vulnerable Canadians across the country. So that's a snapshot of what we do, and we have two pieces of our work. So one piece is about scale up, so things that work, let's go in, invest for the long term, and help them grow. And the other piece is a newer piece, which is with a partnership with Google. So we're working with 10 different social innovations that use technology as enablers. And we're working with them across a year to help scale their impact across Canada.
That's great. Thank you, Narinder. Geoff.
Yeah, so my name is Geoff Cape, and I'm the CEO at Evergreen, and started it 26 years ago. I had a great privilege of still being around inside the organization. And I want to give you a very quick high-level overview of what Evergreen is, and then the challenge or the opportunity we're embarking on right now. So very briefly, we've been around for 26 years. We're about 150 plus staff. At any given time, we have about 100 projects in motion across the organization, whether it's policy work on children's school ground design or laneway housing initiatives or redesign of waterfront or urban revitalization in Hamilton nationally. So we have a lot of projects in motion. And we're a charitable organization, and most of our work is well known at Evergreen Brickworks as a national hub for what we're doing across the country and communities across the country. But the Brickworks isn't the whole story, and that's what most people get caught up in. They think that's the whole thing. The big idea, the big opportunity we're plugging into and trying to drive right now is at the global level, fascinating and almost unimaginably huge. And it's the investment that's in the process of being made in urbanization. Somewhere between $400 and $500 trillion, that's with a T, will be invested in cities over the next 50 years globally. And the big issue in play is, will we build the cities that we've been building for the last 50 years the same way for the next 50 years? Or will we come up with fundamentally different ways of thinking about urban design? And the premise that Evergreen's working with is that Canada builds the best cities in the world. And we have the opportunity to be global leaders, plugging into this economic opportunity globally about building cities around the world. But we get to practice here in Toronto, here in Vancouver, here in Canada, and make our cities the best in the world by innovating aggressively in the next decade, which is a critical time frame for climate change issues, for world population issues, for a whole array of issues that all plug into the way cities are designed. And so our work right now is about finding a model, creating a platform in Canada that we can collaborate on in making sense out of both the innovation challenge or opportunity and the sustainability agenda for cities going forward. So two big things are in motion for us. One of them is to create and essentially redevelop the brickworks, in a sense, by creating, we're in construction right now to create the Future City Center, which is a redevelopment of the big kiln building, if you know it, at the brickworks, to create a hub, a national hub for innovation in cities, where multi-stakeholder, multi-sector parties can come together in a physical space. And the other big part of it is bigger still, and that is to create the Future City Network, which is a national set of collaborations across academic, industry, government, civil society, and citizens to collaborate on this immensely unique opportunity we have, this one moment in time. And it really is a distinct moment. Right now, we're going to be building the infrastructure of our cities that will serve us for the next 50 or 100 years. And if we do it the way we did 50 years ago, we're in big trouble. So we need a lot of collective energy focused on innovation and new platforms. And that's what we're trying to create right now.
So Geoff, will you have that done by noon tomorrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, excellent.
We'll get right on that.
Get right on that. Okay, Valerie.
Okay, thank you very much, Valerie Chort. So I'll talk a little bit more here about our RBC Future launch in terms of why it was so important for RBC to embark on this initiative. And just taking a little bit of a step back, it was actually something that was developed at the same time that RBC was embarking on a broader initiative, which is really the focus on our collective ambition. And our collective ambition anchored by what would be the purpose of RBC to help clients thrive and communities prosper. Why that's important is that it's important to anchor a focus on corporate citizenship, or more broadly, a program as RBC Future Launch, within something that matters and is important across the organization. And there's nothing more important here than anchoring it as an expression of our purpose. So those two pieces were evolving towards the same time to now land us in terms of the announcement of RBC Future Launch. So I'll just cover a little bit more about why. The focus of RBC Future Launch is anchored with respect to that we really believe that an investment in young people and preparing them for the future of work is of critical importance to Canada in terms of Canada's prosperity. So it's important at a national level. We, as the largest financial institution in Canada, have a vested interest in making sure that Canada is prosperous. We are one of the largest employers and have an awful lot to bring to the table when it comes to driving on this agenda. So that's kind of why it's important for RBC. The what about it is focused on something that is very focused. And over the last couple of years, we've gone forth and embarked on the disciplined pursuit of less. And that is hard when we look at what can we address in the realm of helping youth achieve and find meaningful work. We really found that the issue at hand and the barriers that young people are facing and the ones that we were most apt to actually address related to practical work experience, solving the no job, no job, no experience cycle, looking at providing the right career advice at the right time. What is the future of work? What does that actually look like? And 21st century skills. So these three pillars end up then underpinning a number of solutions that we'll be developing. So the commitment is more of a call to action, actually, because as we've heard here, there is a significant, this is a complex issue. We're just part of the cog in that respect. So our approach here is a much more of a more than money approach, looking at bringing the power of RBC as an employer. When you look at the number of people that are part of the RBC family, it's larger than many universities and colleges across Canada. We have an awful lot of learning and development and tools that we can actually bring to the table. Looking at RBC as a convener, bringing people together to solve for this issue in a collaborative understanding the ecosystem. RBC as a funder to fund actually key partners. And then ultimately thinking about this in a way that defines us by the process that we're going to be embarking on. So the process is as important as the programs that we're going to be developing. So keeping youth at the center, making sure that we are explicit in terms of the measurement and the impact that we're looking to achieve. And lastly is really recognizing that there needs to be an investment in the sector as well. How do we ensure that the sector isn't left behind, but we invest in an innovative way to raise the capacity and the capability of the sector? Well, reinvestment in the sector is actually very important as well. So that's ultimately, the announcement was made to give us permission to actually now shape and formulate these programs together, but not to do this in isolation, but do this really in a collaborative way. So it's something we're really excited about and ready to embark on the next pieces.
So it's $500 million over 10 years, is that right?
It is.
That's a lot of money. And money is really critical. So I love the more than money, but money is really critical, and we can't underestimate that. There's an expression that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go with others. You've made a concerted decision to go with others. Can you talk more about some of the challenges around that? You could easily sit at RBC with all your smarticles, as my son would say, your smarticles, and figure this all out. But you've really went out. You've decided to put users at the center. You've gone with others. Can you talk about that process a little bit?
Well, it was a process both to get to the focus area. So we knew that we wanted to commit a substantial amount of, again, I would call them resources with a big R. So financial resources is just part of it. Again, and mobilize our employees and mobilize the other parts of RBC. So, you can't decide on this in a vacuum. So it took an awful lot of engagement from young people, from our internal partners. We actually kind of know we hire a lot of young people and youth in that respect. So it was important just to build credibility and authenticity and lay the groundwork for future partnerships as well. So how do we discover through the process what are the issues at hand? And this is absolutely not done. We've got a team that's doing youth forums across the country, because ultimately, number one, young people are not homogeneous. You know, a 15-year-old is not the same as a 29-year-old. The young person isn't the same if you are an Aboriginal youth, youth at risk, average youth. You're facing these three barriers in a very different way. So for us to be, again, authentic and relevant in the local marketplaces, you just can't take a one-size-fits-all approach. So all of this effort is, in fact, a bit of a discovery, and to be able to build credibility. So I think the stakeholdering is important from the point of view of informing the program that you want to build, identifying the partners and the collaboration that you need to for delivery, and then ultimately, how are you going to know that you're doing a good job? So making sure that you create some mechanisms for feedback loops and so forth. But I think that's key in order to actually affect this. This will happen by kind of top-level programming, but a lot of smaller-level programming that's happening now that just needs, in some cases, to scale and just to share some really bright ideas. It's also an opportunity to find out and to call out things that are actually not working, where there are barriers that have been imposed because people just have a personal and an emotive reason for doing Project X. And if you bring parties together, you really want to invest in what's going to be the right partners for that investment. And sometimes that forces you to really make some tough decisions.
That's great. Yeah, it really does have to be top down and bottom up in order to be sustainable change. So Geoff, when you took on Brickworks, lots of people thought you were a little crazy, and because it was a really big project. And it had been sitting there for quite a while. Now, this next thing you're taking on is also a really big project. What did you learn from the experience of the Brickworks that could be applicable to this new initiative, and maybe for those of us that are also thinking about some big projects?
Yeah, the learnings, wow. I mean, there were lots of them for sure. First of all, it takes longer than you think. But a little bit of naive enthusiasm is a good thing. It gets you up in the morning and keeps you rolling. I've also learned very fundamentally that it's messy work. This notion of linear strategies that are all in a nice, get your plan and then execute your plan is just a non-starter. And so you really just have to start. You just have to go and chunk it out, break off pieces, and figure out that one first piece, put some partners together around that first piece and go. With the Brickworks as a concept, it's a 42-acre site with 16 buildings, and I could go into the complexities behind this one, and they go on and on and on. The next strategy we're building right now, this future city strategy with the center and then the network, is substantially more complex and with much, much bigger dollars attached to it because of so many different players. And herding the cats inside this big tent is incredibly complicated. But what I do recognize fundamentally is that there's a need for somebody to play an honest broker. All of the different sectors bump up against each other, and some of them compete. Some of them just have zero ability to actually communicate with the silo next door. And so there needs to be somebody, some agent needs to play a role in knitting the puzzle together, or at least bringing a platform to the table upon which collaboration can actually be facilitated. And that's a role that we've found ourselves in at a pretty high level. And this next exercise we have in play right now, I wish I could get into some of the details of partners that are beginning to emerge, but they're also, fragile isn't quite the right, they're all emerging right now. And I would love to tell you who some of them are, but I don't think I can. And what I'm getting at here is that's the conundrum of these things. It's never really there until it's all of a sudden there. And so you're stuck with an immense amount of ambiguity every single day. And how you discuss strategy inside the organization and how you discuss strategy outside the organization is almost impossible. And so finding a way to talk about an idea as it's emerging is a real communication challenge. And I can't say we've figured it out, but I can tell you that there's nothing neat and tidy about any of it. But just starting is the first big lesson.
Right. I love the whole concept of comfort with ambiguity. And so if you like really want it all figured out, this social innovation game probably not for you, because there is, you know, part of it too is helping people figure out how their one piece of the puzzle is actually leading to the cover of the puzzle box, right? Like there is actually a picture that's going to emerge from all of this, but you have to recognize that you're part of something bigger than yourself, and you can't do it alone. And finding the right kind of partners, but it's yeah, it's a process. So I'm going to turn to you, Narinder. So LEAP has embraced something called venture philanthropy. Can you explain what that is and the whole trend of venture philanthropy?
Yeah, and our model, I would say, is unique within the spectrum of venture philanthropy. So there's lots of ways you can look at it, but it's taking a more strategic approach to philanthropy. Our model was based on a few new profit in the US and a few others. But essentially, we combine kind of what works in PE and VC and combine that with traditional philanthropy. And so if I were to walk through the process, the first phase of what we do is finding the best. So being independent, leading independent diligence, finding out who are those organizations that are doing things that are measurable, that have impact, that can drive greater impact if scaled, that should be scaled. Going through that process and finding kind of the golden nuggets among the 160,000 nonprofits in Canada and 87,000 registered charities. We have such a strong sector, but there's also a lot of noise in the sector. So being able to get past that noise, past those one-of stories, and getting to the meat of what these real game-changing nonprofits are doing. So that's the first phase of what we do. And then the second is thinking about this as a long-term partnership. So, you know, our kind of way of thinking has always been pick few and go deep. You know, we're not meant to do everything for everyone, but for those organizations we partner with, we're going to create a shared vision at the onset and ensure that we're on a journey together. So typically, we work for 5 years, embed about $3 million of pro bono, and you know, embed ourselves as a center team, which actually, to your point, you have to play a lot, you have to wear a lot of hats and be able to speak a lot of languages of being this broker in that type of role. So Bill Young always uses the word bilingual. So you need to speak the business language and the nonprofit language. So we have our center team that embeds ourselves within the charity, works directly with the charity and our private sector partners, embedding their expertise into kind of the overall growth objective of the, you know, the initial vision. And so all of this, and we also take a board seat, so kind of bringing back to the private equity VC model. And the goal is, again, is we can do more as a collective organization of for-profits working together with the best in the nonprofit sector. And what we've seen is that if we take an approach like this, we're moving the type of pro bono that's typically seen in the sector, which is transactional, to a type of pro bono that is much more transformative. We're with the teams, we're on the journey. It's a live implementation plan, it's a live strategy document. It's all about figuring out together how to make things fit so that ultimately our goal is that all Canadians have access to the best services and not just the services closest to them. And by scaling the best, that's our kind of path to do it.
So you know, far be it from me to argue against Bill Young, but I actually think we need to be multilingual, right? Because I mean, there's an engagement of academia that needs to happen. There's an engagement of government. Like, we need to set these kind of inclusive tables, and so we need these kind of brokers who are really skilled at speaking the language of others. And sometimes we use exactly the same words and mean polar opposites. You know, if I say community to you or value to you, that's going to have really different meanings depending on the mindset that you're bringing to the table. So I think that's the challenge. Another big challenge, and I'm going to stay with you, is metrics. You know, we couldn't have a social innovation thing without metrics coming up, right? So social innovation, this is a question from the audience. So social innovators are often faulted for not having good metrics, and overemphasis on metrics can lead to social purpose organizations creaming the right kind of clients and serving the less vulnerable or the less complex. How can this conundrum be reconciled?
Well, I think the first piece is having a more standard approach. And I know we have this conversation all the time, but a more standard approach to measurement. What one organization measures is often different than the other organization. I think that as a basis, like when we look at organizations that do it right, I take an example of SNAP, which is Stop Now and Plan, our first charity. And they built, Dr. Lena Augimeri, the head of that organization, built in the measurement at the onset of creating the program. So that's something that's not always done. So understanding kind of where you're going while you're building is really critical. But if we're all speaking the same language of measurement, then it's easier to understand kind of what type of vulnerable, youth, for example, you're serving. I would also say that there's also this movement of quantifying impact, and that's been kind of core to what we do. So at the center, we look at what's the breadth and depth of impact of an intervention, and by kind of taking a more holistic approach to looking at impact, we've been able to understand whether or not this organization has the ability to touch more at a lighter level or touch fewer at a deeper level. And so starting to have a more, I would say, common language across the sector is important.
I think that's great, and it's also engagement of the funders, because we all used to be funded for bums in seats. We got 200 of you here today. That's bravo. What impact is this going to have on you? Are you going to think differently about anything? We need to have a different kind of relationship with those that are doing the funding, so we can get to a different level of impact and understanding.
Yeah, and the donors really control a lot. So they are the market force in the sector. So when we think of why we're fragmented, why we do what we do as nonprofits, as charities, it's a function of donors. So the donors, I think, have a tremendous amount of power to support this and really drive this.
Great.
But I would add to that, I think it's also a bit dangerous in that respect that, if we're one donor and you've got a number of donors, even in this room, and we're all trying to measure things for our purpose, to report things for our reasons, the entity suffers because they have to serve a lot of different reporting requirements. So, a condition or a filter could be that it should be as important to that organization. What you're asking them to measure, they should be interested in that information. It should be a way to better manage and deliver the programming that they're looking at delivering. They should be as interested in terms of the impact and the outcomes that we are. So I do think that there is a bit of a cautionary view that a lot of organizations are hopping on a bandwagon around impact measurement, and this is what our outcomes. And so I would encourage others, whether it be the not-for-profit or the charitable sector, to actually, in some cases, if you really think that it doesn't make any sense, to push back and say, well, help me understand what decisions are you going to be making with the information that I'm providing to you? How is this going to inform the next your broader programming? Because it has to really be a conversation. We can just be lulled into comfort around impact measurement without, in fact, achieving and informing. If you want to be insights informed and data driven, well, it has to start with the right information, collecting the right information. So we just have to be careful, and that's where the power of the donor is, in fact, perhaps a bit dangerous in that respect.
Well, and also incredibly expensive. Let's just be clear here.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of this sort of measurement, to be quite frank, and I'm probably getting some nasty stares from my board members over here. But let's just say we spend somewhere around 8% of our budget on financial measurement right now. The much more complex challenge of measuring outcome performance would require what? 10%? 15%? I don't know, maybe 20% of the budget to measure it? To what end? And what sort of utilization do you actually get out of that sort of measurement to actually shift behaviors? Now, I'm all for measurement in isolated spaces where you can actually make incremental change happen. But that larger challenge of measuring outcomes and then attributing cause back to some intervention that you as an organizational player can own 100% of is a tricky process. I think some organizations can do it well, and I know we can do it better than we are currently doing it. I am all for it, but I also don't think it's worth chasing your tail on the subject. The effect of change will be realized, and we will know it. who has measured their performance as a child here, or their performance as a parent here, in some terms that are measurable and comparable across all of us? I mean, we don't even measure that stuff, and that stuff's fundamental to society's fabric, and we don't measure that, right? So let's also cut ourselves a little bit of slack on this subject, and use our common sense on this stuff too.
Yeah, we could have a whole discussion just on metrics, and ultimately, it's, if you're going to ask me to measure something, then I've got to be able to do something with that. Like, don't make me measure it for the sake of making you tick a box, but so that I'm actually going to change my programming to have a better impact. That's a discussion, and it's iterative, and it's back and forth, and it's pivoting, and all that other wonderful stuff.
And it plays into a larger subject, which I'm sorry to take more time here, but one of the lessons I didn't highlight earlier, which I was kicking myself, so to speak, for not referencing it, is the embedded concern about risk in society. It is so pervasive that it freezes us from making change. And I think of the charitable sector, the social sector, as society's R&D department. And that our responsibility is actually to push the edges of what's possible aggressively in order to create the innovation required. But the system, the larger system, is so paralyzed by risk management that it's very hard to push and move things.
But that may be a real role for donors in that respect, right? When we talk about it, and Stephen Hunter talks about it in terms of the P4, so moving from a P3 to P4, how do you actually de-risk things for governments or for not-for-profit or for these areas, or push the envelope on innovation in that respect? Like, there may be some donation or venture philanthropy capital that can actually be used in that respect. So I think it's kind of looking at, and how would you measure that, right? So I think it's kind of looking at measurement appropriate, but with respect to the risk, that is a real issue, and there may be some freedom in looking at it in a different way. Again, looking at how might you fund that as part of a portfolio approach with respect to your programming.
And I just to add on, like, as I think a sector, we also don't like to pick winners or losers. And so again, kind of risk averse, being, just we like the intentionality of doing good, and then want to kind of stay away from saying anything that may offend or potentially risk.
Yeah, but I do think in the world of impact investing, you have opportunities to layer a grant, these kind of opportunities to think really differently about how we fund these projects, I think is another great opportunity. And I think in our sector, Geoff, what often happens is, working at Mars, I understand people invest a lot of money and lose a lot of money, and the VC world gets it. And 1 out of 10 new enterprises will make it, if we're lucky. In our world, we think the consequences are too severe because we're dealing with vulnerable populations, or we're dealing with ecology, we're dealing with issues that there's no space for. And if we don't create space for experimentation, and that's what those multi-sectoral tables enable, like, these kind of discussions don't happen enough in this space. We don't have enough multi-sectoral tables to have these discussions about what real risk means and how to mitigate that and how to embrace it, because we do need R&D for our sector, or we'll keep making the same mistakes. And the last time I checked, we haven't solved homelessness or poverty. So, we have opportunities with SDGs. We have lots of opportunities to be bigger than ourselves around this space, and having these kind of discussions is great. So, Valerie, a question from our audience is, what role could our education system play in driving social innovation and closing the skills/career gap? Role of education.
Well, education plays a key role here, and in the selection of these 3 areas, in fact, one that we can better link is, in fact, having education being a bit closer to the outcomes and the future of work. And it was interesting, just as a key example, we part of the launch of the RBC Future Launch was the development of a commercial. And it was our marketing and brand team that had an amazing idea that said, why don't we actually walk the talk and make sure that our young people that are participating in this commercial, that they, in fact, it's going to be their first job, and that they'll be able to, tout that as key practical experience as we filmed and developed the entire commercial with them at the center. So when we went and called out to universities and colleges to say, we want young people in these specific categories, whether it be makeup, whether it be the creative director and so forth, but it needs to be their first job. We had a laundry list from universities, and we had a very short list from colleges. And so when you look at, I raise that simply because practical work experience, people are thirsty, young people are thirsty for it. And when you look at the availability of practical work experience, the applicability with respect to colleges and universities, I think that there's an awful lot of learnings that can be made across the board with respect to that. So I come back to your question around the education plays a key role. Education needs to be held more accountable in terms of the outcomes that they are delivering on. There is a disconnect. It was a McKinsey study with respect to what do the employers feel. Do the employers feel that young people are ready versus what universities feel in terms of being ready, and the discrepancy is significant. So, but that won't happen just by focusing on universities or colleges or post-secondary education more broadly. It needs to be a more inclusive discussion about this is the future of work. Here are the skills and competencies that we need. We need experiential learning. How is that going to fit into your programming? And then ultimately, what's the role for everybody to play? And what's the role actually of employers in this respect? How many, if you look at the, do you have unpaid internships? Maybe there should be paid internships. How many do you have? How are we helping small and medium-sized businesses embark on and deliver on practical work experience? Small and medium-sized businesses drive our Canadian economy. Why are we not allowing our young people to experience and say, I actually have a future and I want to work and be an entrepreneurial thinking? So, I think we need to also think about this as a collective, and the employers of all sizes really have a role to play. And if, again, coming back to the future economic success of Canada, if we can unlock that potential, young people today can deliver significant value, small and medium-sized companies along the way. If we can capture that, again, I think that the GDP, the prosperity of Canada will be significant. And I think that's the real challenge and opportunity that we have. But it's a collaborative approach.
Geoff, did you want to say something?
No, although I just was thinking, as you were referring to the youth as being the future, and getting that infrastructure in place to get them organized, dovetails nicely with the work we're trying to do, which is around the infrastructure of cities. Getting the framework of our cities sorted out and those collaborations. These are big ideas that Canada's looking at right now, and I don't know how many of you looked with any real care into the budget that came out a few weeks ago with regards to understanding what it was really about. But one thing that really impressed me with that budget, it was an innovation budget to begin with, but there was some interesting criticism of it. My view of it is it was a fantastic budget, mostly because it focuses on innovation and drives that cultural idea into the fabric of Canada, youth, cities, etc. But it was also a fairly open budget. It didn't actually nail down all the pieces. The programs weren't all laid out structurally there, ready for somebody to come in with a proposal. It actually was a very collaborative budget, I guess is the way to put it. It left a lot of room for co-creation with the private sector, and they're being criticized for that. I think it's fabulous for that fact, because they're basically inviting us to work with the federal government in making sense out of these areas that need innovation. And whether or not they can hold on to that in the months ahead is a big question mark. But
Did you want to say anything about the education system?
For us, it's about how do we get it more demand-led and find those opportunities that link back into the employers. We're not going to solve the issue by doing things as we do them today in terms of the supports we give in our kind of lens, the most vulnerable Canadians, to engage in training and employment. So a lot of our work has been around working with the employers. There's this great initiative, we've talked about it a bit, about a bunch of employers coming together and really taking a demand-led approach to supporting the next generation. So that,
Yeah, no, I would say we have to stop passing the buck. I think all of us have to step up and take responsibility, be it at the elementary level, at the university college level, and particularly at the level of employer. We have a responsibility to train folks and to prepare them for 21st century skills, because that's what we need, not only for traditional GDP, but for things like social progress. And I'd also just like to say on behalf of youth, and who am I to speak for youth, but I don't think youth are our future. I think youth are our today. And you know, they're here right now. They're to be valued right now for what they offer and what they bring. And I think with that, I'm going to call Will up, and thank you all very much for this conversation. Thanks.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Canadian Club of Toronto, Geoff, Valerie, Allyson, Narinder, I want to thank you for engaging us on such an important topic, the power and impact of social innovation. The work that you're all doing to advance social innovation to improve all aspects of society is so impressive, and I think we saw today that the sum is far greater than the parts. And that's, I guess, Allison's point about the puzzle box, but that the collective forces of resources, finance, technology, corporate social responsibility, and innovation really can add up to something that is unbelievably impactful. And I thought Narinder's advice, too, on picking a few things, pick a few and go deep, I think is right on the money. You know, I love Geoff's call to action, too, seizing opportunities to be global leaders by innovating aggressively. Absolutely. You know, this is the kind of thinking that certainly helped us at Cisco with our own social impact program. I'll just give a quick plug because I can't resist. But our Connected North program, we went into an Indigenous school in the Arctic to deliver mental health and education services virtually, and it went well, and it had definite impact, and we could have stopped there, but we thought, man, let's just see how far we can push this. And we brought together a huge ecosystem of partners, over 50 of them now, including territorial, federal, provincial governments, and we're going to be in 100 schools. So, you know, it's quite, that's something. So, so talking about, you know, being aggressive, and but I think, you know, quite apart from all of that, I think we all know that social innovation is not without its challenges, and more work certainly needs to be done to engage businesses and organizations and communities to address these social needs and being very specific about the problem that we're trying to address. So, and I applaud Valerie's point too, other than hearing about your amazing program, which I think is so incredible, about RBC seeing and understanding the importance of their role as a convener, because I think no one can do it better than you guys can. So I think I'm finished now. I'm sure you're all relieved to hear it. But you know, my final point, I guess, is we need to come together on the basis of these shared goals and values, and we need to build those ecosystems to drive change, and every single person in this room is probably part of one. So think hard about how you can really, you know, deepen your engagement and your impact. I think what also struck me so much today was this wonderful spirit of collaboration. Like, we so get it. And you know, I've been in this industry for a long time now, and I don't think I've ever seen more openness to really understanding where the resources lie that we need to pull upon to get good things done. I also think the depth and breadth of the fantastic initiatives that was referred to today were just amazing. You know, your leadership is certainly pointing the way forward, and we admire the many ways in which you are all, as leaders in the field, shaping the social innovation agenda. So thank you so much. And Allyson, for moderating today's conversation, you were amazing as always. You brought your characteristic energy, insights, experiences, and depth to the conversation. So thank you to our panel. And they've written this down, so I have to say it. But before we conclude, let me extend another round of thanks to today's sponsor, Cisco. So yeah, I have to say it. So yeah, we need sponsors. And we would also like to thank MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VVC for live streaming today's events. To learn more about the Canadian Club, please visit us at canadianclub.org. So thank you everyone so much for coming, and we hope we see you again next year, or even before that. So have a great afternoon. Goodbye.